Welcome to Focus Today. I'm your host, Perry Atkinson, and what a delight as always to have in the house with us Mr. Patrick Doyle. He heads up Veritas Counseling, and today we are talking about a river in Egypt called denial.
Never been there. Let's try about.
Really? Anyway, it's a big topic. I think we all have our way of dealing with denial, or actually denying things. You know, we have our way of covering things up. Why did you select this? Obviously, it's an issue somewhere.
I deal with it every day on multiple layers. But here's a question I wanted to ask: is that when you hear denial, what's the thing you think of?
What's the thing I think of?
Yeah.
Not dealing with the facts.
Who do you think of as mostly, when you think of somebody in denial, do you think of a certain kind of person?
Yeah.
What kind of person is that?
A person in denial.
Well, I think a lot of people instantly think of addicts.
Oh, well, okay. Yeah, okay.
You know?
But I know a lot of people that are in denial that aren't addicts.
And that's the reason why I wanted to bring it up today, because yes, I do talk to a lot of people who are struggling with addiction. I talk to a lot of family members who are dealing with family members or friends or spouses or children that are addicted, and then the process of trying to deal with somebody that has a lot of denial. But I also see this in marriages. I see a lot of denial in the relational context between man and woman in marriage. I see it with parents and children, children and parents. I see it just across the board. People who live in denial about certain things and the damage that denial does to their relational world.
All right, this opens up a lot of stuff. Let's do some basics.
Okay.
Describe denial.
Unable to see reality.
Unable to see reality.
So you've seen it before. You talk to the guy who is completely out of control, and everybody knows it, and he is just convinced, and he's just powerfully convinced that everybody's just got it wrong, that they just don't see the right things. They just don't understand. I'm not really like that. What about this, and how come that? And you're looking at him right dead in the eye, and he's just as confident as the day is long that he's right. And everybody knows that the evidence is stacked to the rafters that that's not true. I remember one time, here's a great example. I was doing a DUI group years ago, and everybody in the room was there because they had a DUI, and everybody in there, I'd read their files, so everyone in there, I knew what their blood alcohol level was, and I knew why they got arrested. I knew the story behind that. I had the police report, blah, blah, blah. One of the requirements of bench probation when you're in a DUI group is that you can't drink. So we're getting ready for the group, and it's about to start, and then in walks one of the people in the group, and suddenly the whole room smelled like alcohol. And I was like, interesting. I said, so it smells like somebody's been drinking today. And, everybody's just like, all paranoid because, they're in trouble. I mean, they're in a class because they got in trouble. So I said, who's been drinking? Everybody's like, not me, not me. And the guy who was drinking is like, not me. So I said, okay, I'm going to find out. I'm going to go get the breathalyzer. So I went and got the breathalyzer, came back, and I made sure the guy that was drinking was last. Okay, so 0, 0, 0, 0, 0, 0. 1.6.
1.6.
He comes
0.8's bad and 1.6.
He was double the limit. So he comes to DUI class hammered.
Wow.
So the numbers start going up, and then I pull it away, and I say, 0.16, man. Looks like you've been drinking. He's like, I don't know what's going on, but I have not been drinking. He says, that machine needs to be recalibrated, And for a split second in my mind, I thought, well, maybe nah. But his very profound confidence in his own delusion made me doubt for just a second.
Okay, you're really going deep into this because a person in denial doesn't recognize they're in denial.
No.
All right.
Or they have good they rationalize and they minimize things too. So that's another way they convince themselves. But many people in denial are absolutely convinced about what they're talking about.
Mm-hmm.
And so
maybe knowing or not knowing that it's wrong, or it's a false.
I think when I was living in denial at a higher level, I think we all live in denial on some level, but at a higher level, there was a part of me that kind of knew, but I wasn't going to go there. I was fully committed to the rhetoric and the spin. I mean, I've told people this before, but you would have to show me a video of my life historically in some of the earlier parts of my life for me to actually know what happened. Because I had so much denial about everything, I couldn't tell you which was really true. Not to mention I was getting loaded a lot, so that was my perceptions were altered. But think about the damage that happens to the person who can't live in reality.
Okay, so denial is a form of protection.
Yep, can be.
Okay, so psychologically it's a form of protection.
Mm-hmm.
At the root of it, is it spiritual?
Well, I would say yes. Because from my perspective, God is about the truth.
Mm-hmm. He is it, and that sets you free.
Yes. Veritas is Latin for truth.
Okay.
The truth will set you free. Denial is a lie. Who's the father of lies?
Mm-hmm.
It's not God.
Mm-hmm.
It's Satan. So if you're living in denial, you're living in a lie. And that is going to definitely harm you. And so the reason why I wanted to bring up is because I want to talk about the fact that it's harmful to people that are doing it. And you know, when somebody's in a lot of denial and you're trying to have a relationship with them, anger and frustration is going to happen to you eventually, because it's just so maddening when they won't accept responsibility and they spin everything and they blame shift and they turn it back on you and they act like there's no problem, they didn't do anything wrong, you know. But you also have to remember that denial is destroying that person. And I understand that sometimes we have to set a boundary with people, and that's just how it is. But that denial, I want people to understand, is also profoundly destructive to the person that's in it. And here's the thing. If you can't see the truth, you're going to be imprisoned emotionally. And I see this every day, Perry. People coming in with these beliefs. And so I just talked to a guy this previous week who had a lot of trauma as a child, was molested by somebody in his family, was beaten by his dad, was, you know, neglected, yada, yada, yada. Then he grows up and becomes a criminal. And he believes that the reason why he's a criminal is because he's a terrible person. And when we started to explore what was underneath, that, oh, well, when you're molested at a young age and you believe that you're a worthless, no good piece of junk, that has an impact on you. And then he started to be able to see the connection between his experiences and some of his choices, and that as a young kid, it wasn't his desire to be a criminal, but because of the things that happened to him and because of the denial that was thrust on him by the abusive environment he lived in, it cost him years of his life. And so that happens all the time. I'm a victim of it. It happened to me. I grew up in an abusive home, and I spent many years destroying myself because I thought that was what I was supposed to do. But it was when the truth of who I am, it was when the truth of my experiences, I had lived in denial about the actual events that happened to me. I was minimizing the fact that my dad was abusive. If you would have talked to me earlier in my life, I'd have said I had a good childhood. I can't tell you many people I've had that conversation with, Perry, where they say, oh, I had a great childhood, and we start exploring it, and I'm like, what's great about being abused? I don't get that. But you see, that's the denial. That's how we cope with it. And I would say this, that sometimes, in many cases, particularly initially, denial is God's mercy. Helps us survive a very traumatic event. Yeah. Where the problem comes is we stay there. So I could not handle the actual truth of being abused as a kid. Something in counseling we call disassociation. So my dad was beating me, and that's just too much for me to handle. So I would like go away, and then when it was over, I'd come back. And when I came back, sometimes I could remember what happened, and sometimes I couldn't. But that disassociation is what helped me survive it. But at 22 and 18, when I'm still disassociating and I don't live with my dad and he's been dead, that's now, that coping skill is no longer helping me.
All right. We've got to take a break. When we come back, though, the person who is in denial,
yeah,
are they unable to see the result of their denial of their own life? I mean, there's a path of all kinds of litter out there.
Yep. Yep.
Are they denying that too?
Yes, it's imperative. Because how many people have you seen, and I've seen over the years, where if consequences were enough to change someone, they'd be changed. Yeah. But they deny the consequences of their behavior and just keep right on motoring.
All right, we're dealing with, like I said, that river over in Egypt called denial. And Patrick Doyle's with us from Veritas Counseling. We'll take a quick break. We'll be right back.
Hi, I'm Paulina, and I work at the Dove TV. Did you know that when you support the Dove TV, you have a profound impact, not only in our community, but around the world? It's your continued support that takes the inspiration and hope in the programs we produce and makes them available to the thousands of people who are watching these videos online every week. Help bring encouragement and hope to our valley and beyond by making a secure online donation today at our website, thedove.us.
Okay, we're back and talking to Patrick Doyle with Veritas Counseling on an incredible topic called denial. And I think all of us have dealt with it or deal with it.
Every day.
And I don't know what can cause somebody to realize, wait a minute, I don't know what happened to you. I mean, obviously it was a divine intervention.
Yeah,
because other than that, it's got to be an endless cycle for a counselor to deal with if there isn't some kind of a spiritual intervention.
And I think
how do you get off this treadmill?
I think at the core of it, Perry, that's exactly what it is. I see it at the core as a spiritual problem. And like I said before, you're living in the truth or you're living in a lie. And the lie will lead you to a bad place. The truth will lead you to a good place. I didn't say that the good place would be easy to get to, but it leads you to a good place. I mean, the transformation of my life is the result of me aligning myself with who God is and what He says by His help, not me. If it were up to me, I'd probably still be, on my way to, maybe like I've told you before, my dream at 12 years old was to be the head of a drug cartel. And at 16, I lived in my own apartment in Florida, well on my way to accomplishing my goal, right? And it was not long after that God intervened and started to change the way I thought, started to change the priorities that I had, and started to reveal to me the truth of what was really going on with me. So I see this in people a lot, is that, so you're dealing with somebody who has denial, and you keep presenting them the facts, and you keep trying to get them to concede to the facts. You ever had that situation? Mm-hmm. And what do?
Everything but deal with it. I mean, you have better conversation with wallpaper. And I think what happens is when you're trying to get somebody to deal with facts or the obvious environment that they have created.
Yes. Right.
This is where I check out. I mean, because even though I'm not a firstborn, but my type A personality says, hello,
yeah, right. Let's get this taken care of.
Let's get this straightened out here.
Right.
And that's where God's gifted you the patience to come in there, but they just don't see it.
Right. And what I would say is I've never seen consequences be enough on its own.
Really? Mm-mm. So if you...
Now
what?
Well, it's what we've talked about before. Without conviction, I don't believe there's actual change.
Okay.
So unless God reveals to someone, and again, when I say God reveals, it doesn't have to be because they have a spiritual experience, quote unquote. I've seen people in my office who are not Christians hear the truth and respond to it and be convicted, but they don't know that's what it is.
Okay, so even at the cost of relationships, even at the cost of hurting somebody you love, they just don't connect those dots.
Mm-mm. Mm-mm. Nope, exactly. And if there were no denial, most relationships would be a lot better.
Yeah.
They might be harder because you're actually dealing with stuff, and I've said this many times before, I don't think you can have intimacy without conflict. Because if you don't have conflict, you never resolve anything.
Okay. And that brings you together.
And it brings you together. But so I was talking to somebody, I don't know, a couple years ago, and they're good Christian guy, been married, I don't know, 25 years, and we're having a pretty intense conversation, and he made a statement in that conversation that I was like kind of shocked by. He says, I've never been mad at my wife ever in 25 years. And I was like, that's not possible. Your denial is profound, or you're lying to me right now. You're trying to make yourself look good, because that's not possible. Yeah. You can't live with someone for 10 minutes, and not get to a place of anger. Now, anger, we often see it as a negative thing, but I see anger as a good thing if it is an alert that there's an injustice. Okay, if you just get angry and stay in anger and roll around in anger, that's a bad thing. If you use anger for revenge, not a healthy thing. But a lot of times when I get angry at my wife, when I start to really think about it, I get look into it, what I find is that I feel hurt because she did something that I see as harmful to me. I see it as harmful. Now, whether she intended it or not isn't really relevant. So if I live in denial about that, and that's, well, it's not that big a deal. Oh, it's what about it? And then it stacks up, and then it happens again. And so you see this with people with a lot of denial. Things stack and stack and stack and stack, and then one more thing comes on the top of that, and so now it's a level 2 event, and they're having a level 9 reaction. And you're like, that person's always so nice normally, and whatever. And well, that's another sign that somebody's living in denial, that they're not really dealing with reality. And so this is one of the things that damages relationships. If you and I have a conflict and we just put it out on the table and deal with it, tomorrow we can have lunch and enjoy each other. Okay.
It can be a form of protection.
Yep.
I get that. I mean, initially that's God's way of maybe getting you through the event and the trauma.
If it's trauma, yeah.
Is there a self-examination of whether or not
Well, this is the difficulty, Perry, because most people in denial are in denial.
Yeah.
So their insight,
there would be no reason to self-inspect.
Their insight to themselves is poor. They don't have good insight. And so this is the other reason why I keep telling people this. Look, you have to have relationships with other people where they know you enough to tell you when they see something that's inappropriate or too far or not enough or whatever, if they start to see that denial. And I have lots of people around me who can really see it. If I, for example, my wife and children to start with, if I'm in denial, I hope and pray they say something. If my friends see me in denial about something, I hope and pray they say something.
We'll talk during the break.
Okay. I appreciate that. It wasn't long ago that one of my friends came to me about something I said on the air. He's like, are you sure, that's exactly, the case? And I was like, oh, I don't know. I hadn't really thought about it that way. And, and really what it was is just something I hadn't thought about. But I need that kind of feedback. Otherwise, that stuff can just gloss over and develop and gloss over and develop. And so living in the truth is the richest form of living. People use denial to avoid conflict. People use denial to avoid consequence. People use denial to not see what's really there.
Is anger a proof of some form of denial?
Generally.
Okay.
Yeah, I don't think you're going to have good denial and not be angry. And I've never, ever, not one time, Perry, confronted somebody with significant denial and had them thank me.
Okay.
Their initial reaction is usually they get angry at me.
Is there ever a time to let a sleeping dog lie?
Yes.
Because sometimes somebody's in denial over an event that was horrific.
Yeah.
And do you really want to poke that fire?
So that's a great point, because here's the thing that I say a lot to people is that you don't confront somebody in denial without your own conviction to do so. You don't do it just because you're a do-gooder or just because, and I learned this the hard way in my early part of my career.
A lot of people will confront it because that person's not doing what they want them to do.
Exactly, which is really about them.
Yeah.
It's not about loving the other person.
Right.
And so early on, I'm very perceptive. I've been given the gift of, perception and intuition, and I can feel people and understand them. And when I was younger, I thought that everything I felt or saw, I was supposed to deal with.
I'm guilty.
And what God revealed to me over time was that, son, I'm not giving you the information so you can go deal with it, but I just want you to be aware of it, and then when it's time, I'll let you know.
Okay.
And so then I'm in a relationship with somebody and I have that information and it's not time for me to say anything yet. But then when it is time, I know. I get that, okay, now's the time. And then I got to go in there and I got to deal with it. And so in the church, what I see is a lot of, if you see a problem, you got to be on it. And I'm like, well, I don't want us to let anything fester. I don't think that's a healthy thing. I also want us to be sensitive to timing, because like you just said, there's a time for things. It's not always just because you see it. I would say if you see it, then the first step you should take is go to God and say, God, what do you want me to do? How do you want me to handle this? Is this time? And be sensitive to that instead of you deciding for that person. Because remember, He's got His own plan, God, about how that denial is going to get broken. And you and I both know if God's going to break somebody's denial, there's nothing anybody's going to do to stop it.
If someone has been in denial for years, and they've actually developed a lifestyle around
Yes.
it, a pattern. I mean,
Yes.
their personality now has been altered because of it.
Right.
Is it really healthy to poke in there and deal with it?
I think so.
Okay.
But where people start to get worried is because that's going to create a crisis for that person. If they really do start to see that they actually are a persona, they're not actually a real person, it's just some projection, that's going to be devastating in many ways. But that pain, in my estimation, is productive.
So I would assume the person who's in this deep level 9 denial, as you say, then they really don't have sounds judgmental, but they don't really have an honest relationship with God.
No. And and at the height of my most intense denial, I was the most self-righteous.
Really?
I was more honest when I was a drug addict than when I became religious.
That's quite a statement.
I know, because what would happen is, because in the drug world, I could be whoever I wanted. No one's going to judge me, right? I get into the church, and now I got to be a certain thing. Otherwise, I won't be accepted. Otherwise, I won't be, whatever. And so I started developing this persona. And I've told the story before about when God broke that down. It was a revelation of Himself to me that helped me start to live in the truth of who I was, which was really a broken, hurting, tormented soul. Instead of, ta-da, I'm this great spiritual person who does all this great spiritual work. Meanwhile, back at the ranch, I'm living two lives because I can't really be honest about who I am. And to me, that's one of the worst traps you can be in spiritually, because you're lying to yourself and God and suffering in the meantime.
When you're dealing with an addict in denial,
Yeah.
and that is probably how most of us would see denial. You and I have dealt with it in other areas. But let's say the addict for denial. If you're unable to break the ice, so to speak,
break through,
then maybe the only thing you can do is leave. Is that enough for the person in denial to take a second look?
Well, so what you're talking about from my perspective is that, like, I have encouraged, lots of people over the years, that if you have somebody who's an addict, and let's be clear, when I'm talking about addiction, I'm not talking about just the drugs and the alcohol. There's lots of different forms of that. So when that person is confronted with the truth and they do their spin and they rationalize and they justify and they minimize and all of that, and then you set a boundary with them, you set a little bit of a boundary and they blow past it and just ignore you and don't have any respect for your boundary. At some point, you have to protect yourself from that person's harm, which means remove relationship, right? That's a healthy boundary in some cases, right? Well, sometimes the loss of relationship is used by God to get the person in denial to start to see truth. Sometimes it's not. And so what I think I hear people a lot of times saying, well, if I set this boundary, then that'll work, right? And I'm like, well, I don't know, maybe. I'm not in charge of the outcome of that, but it doesn't mean that you setting the boundary is not still healthy and valid and good for the person that you're dealing with.
As long as the reason that you're setting the boundary is communicated.
Yes, exactly. You can't just arbitrarily do it with no communication. You have to let the person know. And listen, they may or may not hear you.
Yeah.
You know, you can say it as plain as day, and I always encourage people in this situation. I always encourage people to write it and give it to the person in denial. Because then when the spin starts, you can be like, wait, this is what I said right here. I don't know where you're getting that. This is what I said. Mm-hmm. So, but somebody in denial, I guarantee is going to spin it. So you need to write it because it stays clear. The other thing that happens is you have a record of what you said. Mm. They can also, the person in denial also can have that piece of paper and read it as many times as they want, and it stays exactly the same. Okay? And they can read it in the comfort or in the privacy of their own world where no one knows they're reading it. But you can't do that conversationally.
All right, let me take a break. Patrick Doyle's in the house. We're dealing with an incredible subject called denial, and maybe we'll deal with some levels of it. You could be dealing with it and you don't even know.
Yeah.
You know? And is denial different than suppression? We'll talk about that when we come back.
Hi, I'm Paula, and I work at the Dove TV. Every day we get letters and emails from people who've been encouraged, blessed, and challenged by the programs on the Dove TV. But we couldn't do it without you. Did you know that more than 90% of our income comes from people like you? You can help us continue to bring inspiration and hope to our community by making a secure online donation at our website, thedove.us, or call us at 541-776-5368.
Welcome back, and Patrick Doyle's with us in the house. He heads up Veritas Counseling here in Southern Oregon, and the number there is 541-622-6018.
622-6018. Look at that.
Well, you know, I got that. 622-6018, area code 541. We're dealing with the subject of denial. Okay, I get it. We can go in denial. It can be a protection zone till you kind of gather what's going on.
Yeah.
Or you suppress it. I get all of that. And denial can be extremely destructive. You know,
it's relationally destructive.
Yeah. And a lot of addicts are in it for a while. You know,
it's necessary for an addict to be in denial. How many? But think about this, Barry. It's one of the things I want to talk about. You know how many marriages that are functioning on a daily basis that have a high level of denial in them?
And that would be what? I mean, denying offenses?
Denying offenses, denying the reality of the lack of intimacy in the marriage, denying the difficulty of how one person may be treating another, or how one person may be like not getting involved with the other person. And the denial becomes necessary for their survival unless they're willing to be involved in the conflict of moving through the problem. And so I see so many relational situations getting worse because of denial. But I also see that when people start to, and our culture teaches us to avoid the conflict. And so in essence, it encourages denial. So listen, conflict is good if you're moving through it. Conflict that is abusive, obviously that's not good, because there's no resolution, that's just more harm. But if two people are in a relationship and there's some level of trust, then putting the issues on the table is going to lead you to a good place. But I can't tell you how many times in a week I hear someone say, yeah, but my spouse doesn't see it. I've said this, I've said this, I've said this, I've done this, I've done this, I've done that, and my spouse just won't see it, just can't see it. And so that denial creates now a block of intimacy, connection, goodness in the relationship, because one person is unable to see the truth. When you have two people who can be convicted, you have a good relationship. I didn't say painless, Because every time you got two people in a relationship, you're going to need to forgive. It's just how it is, because people are sinners. I hurt my wife or hurt my kids, they hurt me. And if we don't resolve that, we're going to have to go into some form of denial. And so I think as Christians, we should be leading the way in this, because look, we have the promise of the gospel. We're not going to be left. We're not going to be ignored. We're not going to be cast away. We're not going to be beaten up. God loves us, and He's demonstrated that love for us. So I know that on a spiritual level, I'm golden. So as a result of that, now I can move into the conflict with you or my wife or my kid, because my well-being isn't hinging on how the outcome of this relationship.
Okay, a couple things come out of this. One is, I've done enough lay counseling to know that sometimes somebody's interpretation of denial, in other words, you got a spouse comes in saying, my hubby's in denial about da-da-da-da.
Right.
When really the motive behind that is, I'm not getting what I want.
Yeah. Mm-hmm. And sometimes that's legitimate. Sometimes what is wanted is healthy.
Yeah.
And sometimes what is wanted is selfish.
Right.
But that's another reason why we got to have the conversation.
Right.
Well, this is inappropriate. If I've had $1 for every time I've seen two couples doing this, which is where one of the big tragedies I think in the church, and I think one of the reasons why our divorce rate is so high in the church, is because people are getting married for a lot of bad reasons. People in the church get married to legalize sex, not because the actual relationship is healthy. They get married because, it's what they're supposed to do. It's what their parents want. They get married because they want security. They get married because they think their lives will be more spiritual. Mm-hmm. They get married for a lot of those reasons. But listen, if you don't have a satisfaction in God, and that, like, your soul is satisfied in God, and that's the starting place, and then you want to join another human being and share that, and instead what you're going to do is try to pull from that person what you need. And I can just tell you right now that no person has what you need. Okay. Now, does my wife meet some of my needs? Yes. Do I meet some of hers? Yes. But my starting point isn't there. My starting point is God meets my needs, and because of that, I'm able to give to my wife. And so then that becomes something, instead of me pulling, it's me giving. And when two people are pulling, it's not going to work. And I see this day in and day out and day in and day out.
Let me go gender on you for a minute.
Okay, good.
Because a lot of times I've dealt with husbands who have taken the path of least resistance for the sake of peace, and it's being interpreted as denial.
Mm-hmm. Yes.
They come home, they're wore out. Mm-hmm. They've said their 8,000 words.
Right.
Your wife says 10, and she's got another 20 to go.
Yeah, uh-huh.
You know the drill.
Yeah.
And so it's just better to kind of roll your eyes and move on than to deal with the conflict, because you just kind of wore out.
Yeah. And I would say that's an inappropriate way to spend your energy. Look, if you don't prioritize that emotional energy for your wife or your relationship or your husband, then you're going to end in trouble. So, do I have a lot of people that have demands on me? Yes. Is my schedule packed? Yes. Am I always on the edge of irresponsibility because I do too much? Yes. That's a constant theme in my world. Okay, so my wife comes to me and says, this isn't working for me. I'm like, oh, well, I'm doing all this good stuff. Just get over it, or, I'm not really.
I don't mean being cynical.
Yeah, I'm not being very receptive in the initial phases of this.
Okay, I can get you counseling. I know a guy. Yeah.
And so I'm like, why don't you give me credit for all this good stuff I'm doing? She's like, I do, but that's not. What about me? What about our relationship? What about you can't spend all your energy elsewhere?
And his response to that would be, well, what about me?
Yeah, well, so here's what I said to my wife. I said, here's the deal, honey. You're right. I do need to prioritize our relationship. So I have a time in my schedule that's a block of 5 hours every week. Do not get a divorce time.
Well, that's one way. You write that in your calendar?
Yeah, I do.
Yeah, that's pretty impressive.
Yeah, because here's the deal. If I don't prioritize time with my wife, it'll get eaten up. And so when I started doing that, what it says to my wife are some very important things. And listen, every week at that appointed time, we don't have deep and heavy conversations. I mean, sometimes we do. Sometimes we just go and have breakfast and hang out and talk about all the stuff that's going on in our worlds. But here's the deal. If we don't have time elsewhere in the week, we both know that for sure, unless, God returns or I go to jail or die, we're going to have that time where we can have a conversation about whatever. So we can both bring stuff to that time that we weren't able to get to otherwise.
So you're saying that the guy, for the sake of peace, is going down the wrong road?
Yes.
Okay.
Because you and I both know that letting it slide for the sake of peace is just avoidance. And if I come home on Tuesday and I'm thrashed and I'm like, today's not the day for that. And my wife's like, okay. And then tomorrow comes and then 2 weeks and then a month later we still haven't dealt with it. Now we got a problem because I'm avoiding it. Instead of, I'm like, tonight, honey, I'm just too, and I've said this, tapping out, and, where's the bed? And because I just want to take a nap. And so, but if the next day I don't bring it back, now I'm avoiding it because she made a request. I need to talk about this. And, it's not inappropriate request. It's not like, they want to talk about rocket science and, solve the world's problems. It's usually something very important like, what's happening with the kids or that thing you said to me or what are we going to do about this or whatever. And so when we don't communicate in that way, and Perry, I think our culture, men in our culture are awash in this sort of avoidance. And I think it's partly what we've been told.
Okay.
We've been told that to be a good man, you're nice. I think that's a lie.
Oh, okay. We're going to take a break. When we come back, we're going to listen to classical music. We'll be right back.
Hi, I'm Daniel and I work at the Dove TV. Compared to Portland, Seattle, and LA, Medford might be considered a small market, but at the Dove, we're excited about the opportunity to make a big impact right here in our community. And you help make that happen. Did you know that more than 90% of our income comes from people like you? You can help us now by making a secure online donation at our website, thedove.us, or by phoning 541-776-5368.
Okay, we're back with Patrick Doyle, and we're dealing with denial. I just thought we'd close out with listening to some classical music or something. I think we all suffer with it. And, it really takes, it's like anything else. It takes personal fortitude and discipline to grip with something that's got a hold of your life.
Yeah.
You can take on every diet plan out there.
Right.
All of them require the same thing.
Yeah.
Discipline.
Yeah.
And so motives. And so let me ask you this. Going into the break, you said men are told to be nice.
Yes. And I don't agree with that.
And you don't agree with that. And I want to say this carefully because I don't need anything political nonsense in my life, but it appears to me that we have feminized masculinity. It shows up in church services, shows up in our culture.
Right.
Et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. Right. And so a guy just thinks being nice, and I'm not talking the complete opposite of that, you become a jerk.
No.
But what is happening to manhood?
Well, masculinity and the idea of masculinity has been hijacked by our culture. And so from my perspective, one of the ways that men reflect God in his masculine being is through the power of initiation. Who initiated the relationship between us and God?
God.
Yeah. He's full of initiation. He initiated the creation of the world, right? Mm-hmm. He sustains it. Mm-hmm. He deals with it. He is an initiator. And one of the ways men reflect God masculinely is by being an initiator. But when you're nice, that's one of the things that gets lopped off. You don't initiate stuff. You make stuff nice. I don't think that's right. I think that, like our buddy Paul Coughlin says, in his book, No More Christian Nice Guy, It's not about being nice, it's about being good. That's true. And if you're good, you're going to initiate discussion or behavior that's going to deal with the conflict or the problems in your relationship. If you don't, you're not being godly.
All right, because this is a big part of what we're discussing today, and guys, I want to say in a very respectful way, I really think what the world is starving for here, Patrick, is for masculinity and leadership to return.
Yeah.
Now, I'm talking about the hunter-protector and those kinds of things too.
Right.
I think you are being nice by showing initiative.
Yeah.
I think you're being nice by leading.
Right.
You're being nice by being a man.
Right. Well, nice defined in the best sense of the word, not as it's defined today, which is the absence of any sort of, conflict. That can't be the case. I mean, so the other part of that is that one of the ways women reflect femininity is by being receptive and inviting, which has also been damaged. So if a man initiates, then a woman is open and receiving, right? And then there's a responsive cycle. Man initiates, woman's open, receiving. And here's what I see time and time again, Perry, and there's a lot of denial that makes this happen. Man tries to be nice, doesn't initiate. Woman, in a deep desire to be connected, stops being open and receptive and starts trying to be initiative. She starts trying to get him to do something, right? Well, now what happens is the roles switch. Now you have a woman being masculine, which she doesn't like, she hates, and you have a man who feels inadequate because his wife is always initiating. He can't get out of he can't do anything right. And so you have that switch, and now you have a man being in the feminine role, you have a woman being in the masculine role, but it started because we stopped initiating. And I see this all the time, and I teach guys this all the time. Look, when I say initiation, I'm not talking about fixing the world's problems or making your marriage perfect. I'm talking about having the courage and the faith to move into the difficulty of your family or move into the difficulty of your wife, and not in a controlling, lord it over them, king sovereign thing.
Right. Is a person in denial, then one of the signs of denial is a lack of initiative?
Yes. Yeah, they won't initiate toward anything in healing. Their initiative is always about avoidance. And so this is, when you're in a relationship with somebody who has a lot of denial, it makes the other person feel kind of crazy because they keep trying to get to some resolution, get something figured out, and get some change, and the other person is just, and this is true for people there's a lot of people in relationships with people that are in denial that don't use drugs or aren't alcoholic. But they have as much denial as that person that would be because they will avoid responsibility to beat the band. And so when you have somebody in the relationship who will take responsibility, who does that reflect? Did God take responsibility? When we don't take responsibility, it's not reflecting Him. All right, who denied his actions when he was in heaven? Who lived in denial and said, no, I'm going to be like God? And
Yeah,
God's like,
Satan.
no.
Satan did.
Okay, so when we take responsibility for actions, that's a reflection of God.
All right. I've seen it more than one occasion. You have too. You probably live with it on a weekly basis.
Yep.
You got two people married and they're both in denial.
Yep.
And they're both clamming for identity and turf.
Yes, unfortunately, rather than resolution.
Yeah.
And resolution comes because people take responsibility. Resolution doesn't come because we figure out what happened. Figuring out what happened is only a piece of it. Once we figure out what happened, who's going to take responsibility? And I'd say this a lot, and I know a lot of guys don't like this, but I really believe that the marriage will get better faster if we as men lead the way by initiating first.
Okay, so what would be a classic example of that? I mean, there's so many issues. Where do you start? So what does the initiator do?
Here's what I say to guys all the time. What are you convicted of? Not what's your wife telling you.
Okay.
Because if you're going to listen to her and just obey that, then you've switched roles. You're now the responder. That's not appropriate. What is God convicting you of? Well, if you say nothing, well, now we got another problem. Why not? How can you not be convicted of something in a relationship? So whatever God's convicting you of, start there. What's he saying? You know, when you were harsh, or when you worked too much, or when you were yelling at the kids, or when whatever, I don't know, when you don't talk for days, or whatever your situation is, when God convicts you, then what I want you to do is go to your wife and I want you to write it down, write out your confession, go to your wife and say, honey, I have something I need to confess to you. And then you confess the sin that you're convicted of to your wife, and you ask her, will you forgive me for this sin against you? And you take responsibility. I guarantee you, unless a woman is profoundly pathological or you're faking it, they're going to respond.
And I've also noticed when that occurs that all of the other trivial complaints seem to fade like that.
Exactly, because what most women are looking for is not a guy who's good or perfect. What they're looking for is a guy who's honest, who will own his responsibilities. Look, I'm still married, not because I'm good. I'm still married because I've been convicted and repented. I've done plenty to destroy my marriage. Yeah, no marriage lasts because we're good. Marriages last because you own the responsibility of your behavior. If a woman trusts that you're convictable, you'll be a happy man, if you know what I mean.
All right, denial. It's big. You deal with it in a variety of forms.
Right.
I would assume that, what would you say to somebody that, geez, I don't know if I'm in denial? Where would you tell them to look to see if they are?
Well, the first thing I would do is I would talk to the people that are closest to me and say, hey, I'd actually maybe write them and say, hey, I'm concerned that maybe I got some blind spots. I do this on a regular basis, and I encourage anyone else to do it too. So I ask people around me, what do you see my blind spot as? Where do you see where do you see me in denial about something? And I ask for feedback. And then when they give it to me, I take it seriously. But most people don't ever ask that question. We're too busy trying not to drown. So you have to, and I also would say this, there are many people that don't have any relationship. There are many Christians who don't have any relationships where they could ask that question.
Okay.
Because no one knows them enough.
Is it another sign that you really don't see God as a safe place? Or maybe that's too big. Maybe you just don't totally trust, or you don't totally believe, or you don't totally have the faith.
Well, I think you're on it when you say you don't trust, because listen, I don't tell people I don't trust my problems. So if you can't go to God honestly about how you feel, then you're going to probably end up in some kind of denial. And it's the starting point is with Him. And listen, He already knows anyway. You're not really hiding anything. That's denial.
Yeah. Well, I can't deny we're running out of time. Let me just say to our
no classical music.
His phone number to his counseling, Veritas Counseling, is 541-622-6018, 541-622-6018. You can go to veritascounseling.com, check it out there. And today's program will be at the dove.us website sometime late this afternoon or tomorrow, and you can share our time together maybe with somebody who's in denial. You can share it with them. Thanks, buddy. We'll see you next time on Focus Today.
Hi, I'm Jim, and I work at the Dove TV. Every weekday between 6 and 8 a.m., our award-winning news and sports team bring you the best morning show around. It's live, it's honest, and it's a whole lot of fun. And you help make it happen. Did you know that more than 90% of our income comes from people like you? You can help us continue to air local programs that share your voice by making a secure online donation at our website, thedove.us.